Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I have a review here to continue my Friday the 13th movies, starting with Part 5, A New Beginning. Yes, I have this lenticular cover deluxe edition from way back in the day. I also have a secondary copy of the film in a 2-pack with Part 6 that I bought more recently after this, I believe. I'm a big fan of Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. A very big fan. As a matter of fact, it might even be in my top 3 movies of the entire series. I love it. I don't give a shit what anybody says about what they think of me or think of the movie down in the comments. I know many of you probably hate this movie, but personally, I feel like as time has gone on, has passed over the years since this came out in 1985, 1 year after Part 4, which was supposed to be the ending of the series, the title of this being A New Beginning, kind of tried to do a soft reboot with some very controversial ideas and concepts that I will not spoil in this movie, or this review, but I have to kind of be very careful and walk on eggshells as I talk about this movie, because I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it. A lot of my viewers may have not seen it. I don't know. Most people have seen Friday the 13th movies. But anyway, this is very different. Let me start off, before I get into that, with a small moment of recognition. I'm doing a collaboration for these reviews with a couple of other guys. I've talked about them in my previous couple of videos for Part 1 through 4. The main one who started this whole thing was Stranger Grayson. He's a good friend of mine. I put his link to his channel down in the comments, or the description, excuse me. I keep saying comments, why do I do that? I put it in the description section of my video. So check it out down below. There's also another fellow who jumped on a couple of videos ago of mine named Goosebumps Boy. Excuse me, Goosebumps Boy. And he's a good reviewer too. He's in the middle of his reviews. I think he's pretty early on. He's like Part 3, Part 4 right now, whereas Grayson and I are Part 6 and 7 and whatever. Well, I'm about to start watching 6, but you know what I mean. So these reviews we're going to kind of have to take our time with because of how we're trying to get everything done. There's a lot going on amongst the three of us. But anyway, I'll put a link to Goosebumps Boy's channel down in the comments, or the description. The description section, again, for him as well, in case you want to check out his channel too. I recommend both of those guys. They're really good guys. Good reviewers too. Now back to Part 5. I love hearing people's opinions about Part 5, because again, it's getting more positive over time because you have Part 6 through whatever, 11 or 12, I think there's 12 movies now. You have Part 6 through all the way to 12 now, and at the time when this came out in 1985, you just had the first 4 and then you had this, obviously. But if I had been around in the audience at that time and had seen this movie, it would have felt like The Last Jedi all over again. It would have killed Friday the 13th if it had come out now. That's just the facts, in my personal opinion. You have a director here who was doing porn and stuff once upon a time, as in directing porn. Not starring in it, but like directing porn. And he brings that sleaziness and that classlessness to this movie in a very exploitation way. And dude, it is wonderful. I love it. A good friend of mine that I talk about here on the channel a lot, Horror Free For All, put his, he might comment down in the comments, I don't know. But in his setup for his videos, he has a picture of the poster from this movie behind him. Now, the poster of the film, with the certain hockey mask they use, as well as the different hockey mask they use for Jason in this film and his design, it looks like shit. The original poster, I can't stand it. I think it's ugly as shit. The one that you saw for the thumbnail of this video. But I love this particular poster. I think this looks amazing, in my opinion. Even with the newer Jason hockey mask that doesn't have like a red stripe up here, it has like the blue stripes, right? Very different. Jason's design here, I personally like it more than Part 3. And I guess Part 3 and Part 4 are kind of the same thing, but Part 4 he's like wet all the time, so it looks a lot darker. But it doesn't look as good here as it does in Part 4, but you know what I mean. Where do I even start with this movie? I guess I'll start with my personal history with it before I get to the plot. So, many years ago, I was probably like 7 or 8, my grandfather and I were hanging out during October, and of course, what happened during October? Well, the gift that kept giving, something like that. It kept giving me shit constantly, is what I'm trying to tell you. AMC Horror Fest is what I've been saying all of these things to get to. The AMC Horror Fest, where they played a bunch of horror movies during October to try to scare children who happen to be snooping around on cable. And that was probably one of the earliest introductions to Friday the 13th I ever had. I had just maybe a year or two before had found out what Jason was, or that it even existed for that matter. I had been a Michael Myers fan for a while, and Freddy and Chucky scared the shit out of me. I didn't know anything about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre until after I saw this, I believe. But Friday the 13th, Part 5, was on TV one day when my grandfather and I were watching TV down in our finished side of the basement, And we had it on a huge screen TV, one of those massive big screen TVs from back in the day that were heavy as hell, like 300 pounds heavy. The thing was ridiculous, but it was raining outside. We couldn't go out and get in the pool. It was probably about 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon or evening, whatever. When does afternoon and evening transition? Who cares? We were watching TV, this was on, and he knew that I liked horror movies, and my mom was showing me horror movies and stuff. By this time, we had not moved in with them when my parents had split up. My parents were still together at this time. So, I say all that to say this. My grandfather and I didn't really watch many movies together. A lot of it was usually like Star Wars and that kind of thing. Or like the Pink Panther, or like Wild Hogs with Tim Allen, when that came out in like, 2008? Many years later after this, because I was 7 or 8 and probably 2002, I think is the math, or 2003, somewhere in there. Anyway, they had this on TV, part 5, and it was probably in the last 20 minutes of the movie. Maybe 25, somewhere around there, for an hour and a half long movie. And I had known about Jason, I knew what he was, I liked slasher films and whatever, that's what I started out on, was slasher films like Halloween. And I started watching this with my grandfather, and by the time it got to the big controversial twist that I will not spoil in this video, in case somebody hasn't seen it, I don't want to be held accountable for ruining this awesome kind of new storyline they went for this movie, I was shocked by what I saw. I was very much shocked, in a good way. And for a long time there, I thought that the ending of this film was a fever dream of something else that I had seen that I just thought was like a knockoff of Friday the 13th, but it wasn't. And many, many, many years later, like probably maybe 5, 6 years later, I think I was 12 or 13, I found out on the internet what this movie was called, and that it did exist, and that it was a very disliked, hated movie, which shocked me, because I remember my grandfather and I, to this day my grandfather will tell you, we both loved this flick when we watched it that one time. That was the only time I had seen it until I was probably 13 or 14 again. And I loved it, and I loved Friday the 13th, but to me, I missed movies all the time. I didn't know that, like, I had never seen part 2 until I was like, I think 14, 15, maybe a little bit younger. I don't know, it was a long time. Maybe I was older. I can't remember what I said in my part 2 review. I did the math at the time, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But I saw part 2 way later past everything else. And I saw 1, 3, 4, let's see, 6, 7, I think even 8 a bunch of times before I ever even got around to seeing like part 2 or like or part 5 or part 9 with Jason Goes to Hell, which never came on TV. They always played like part 1 through 8, and sometimes Jason X would come on Sci-Fi Channel, and that was like it, dude. Anyway, I loved this flick, and I was shocked that everybody else hated it, and I hunted it down, and I bought copies of it, as I showed you, the 2 copies I have, and I've loved it ever since. I still think it's a really good flick. Again, probably in my top 3 of the entire Friday the 13th series. But again, if it had come out once upon a time, and I had been there to see it in 1985, at that once upon a time, I think I would have been so angry, like so many people. But you have so many movies that have come out after that, that I feel like it's really corrected it. I feel like a lot of people thought The Well was poisoned at that point, and they're probably not wrong at that point. But it just kept getting better and better. We had part 6 come after this because of the failure and controversy of this film. Remember back in the day when you made sequels to movies, and if the audience hated it, as the consumer, you fixed it as the creator, or the whatever you want to call yourself, the industry. Hollywood especially. If the previous film did horribly because the audiences hated a certain change or a twist or whatever, they did something different, completely different, to kind of make amends with the audience in the next movie. Remember when Hollywood used to do that? Disney could take a definite note from that. Anyway, so this film was so controversial that we eventually had to soft reboot it again for the second time in the series with part 6. Even down to the title, kind of had to give you confidence that what you were going to get was what you were going to get. And the sleaziness in this film, the exploitation, the amount of gore, and it's kind of censored sometimes, which is a shame because part 4 didn't really have that. But Friday the 13th from this point on was on the chopping block, but a lot of the kills were still effective in this film because of what it implies, because of the sound effects, because of the setup for those kills. There's a lot of brutality in this film, and I love it. I fucking loved what I saw in this film. And every time I watch it, I like it more and more. It's kind of like, it's kind of like, for me, out of the first 5, this is like my go-to. Like, I like it the most. I admit that part 4 is probably better made, in quality, in filmmaking aspects, all of that, the gore, the effects that Tom Savini did for there, he did not come back for here. Yeah, 4 is probably a technically better movie, but I love 5 way more. I just do. I don't know what it is about it, but it's really stuck with me over the years. Unlike something like Halloween Ends, which is kind of our version of Friday the 13th Part 5, whatever, A New Beginning, that people feel like it's poisoned the well of Michael Myers. And it kind of did. It kind of did. And I don't think Halloween Ends will possibly ever get the love that some people, some shills even, are trying to say that it does have already, just like with The Last Jedi. Same thing there. Neither property, Halloween or Star Wars, in my personal opinion, will ever recover from what happened with Last Jedi and Halloween Ends. In my personal opinion, that's just me. But Friday the 13th managed to do it after this movie, but I don't think this was a bad movie like those two movies were bad. You know? I don't think that's the same situation or the same time that we're dealing with here. But anyway, moving along to the actual story of the movie, we kind of have a prologue here of Tommy Jarvis, played by Corey Feldman, for like 2 seconds, coming back for a possible resurrection of Jason Voorhees when he sees 2 guys digging up Jason's grave. Jason comes back, kills those guys, but then it turns into like a dream sequence. We don't know if Tommy ever actually saw this happen, or if it's just another nightmare. Now that he's an adult, he's been dealing with trauma his entire life. He has to be like another 10 years older. He has to be like 18 years old now. The guy has to be, like, this has to be taking place in like 1990 something now. It has to be. It has to be in like, 93 or 4 or something at this point in context. If we consider this canon, which it has to be being called Part 5. What? Yeah, it seems like it to me. Anyway, this is probably the worst performance of Tommy Jarvis in the entire series. I don't blame this young man who is playing the older Tommy Jarvis that's like 18 or 19. It's not that he's horrible, it's just that they don't really give him anything to work with. Tommy doesn't talk as much anymore. He's kind of being set up because of the ending of Part 4 and the trauma he's dealt with for so long, being locked away in an asylum for so long, away from his mom, his sister, his dog. We don't even know what happened to them, really. He's been locked away for so long that he's just kind of a quiet, silent type that just keeps to himself. He doesn't really talk to anybody, talk to people, adults, anything. And he's being transported to this new place to kind of reintroduce him into society. He can do anything he wants, hang around with whoever he wants, make friends, whatever. Which seems like the antithesis to what he would want to do, because he is Tommy. You can't tell me they didn't ask him if he wanted to do this before he went to this place. And maybe he's just doing it because he misses his mom and sister. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking with this. But he goes to this place that has a group of troubled kids that, again, are trying to be reintroduced back into the world. Most of them seem like just regular people. Like just regular spoiled brat teenagers, young adults, whatever. Then you have like one guy who's clearly not all there mentally. And then you have like one dude who's clearly very, 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 very aggressive by the events that take place not too long after that. And then you got Tommy, who doesn't talk. You also have a guy who works there who has a grandson named Reggie, whose nickname is Reggie the Reckless. And I fucking love Reggie. I've always loved Reggie. My first ever Friday the 13th Part 5 memory, the one I talked about with my grandfather and I watching it in our finished basement on a rainy day, involved when Reggie found a bunch of dead bodies later on in the film. That was the moment that I had turned this movie on to, and I was like, whoa. Heard the music, Harry Manfredini came back once again. I knew immediately it was Friday the 13th. Kept watching it from that point on. So, I love Reggie, one of my favorite Friday the 13th characters of all time, but my favorite Friday girl in this series is in this movie, and that would be Pam. Oh my god, this chick, holy shit. Anyway, Pam is beautiful. She's kind of like a counselor lady that works at this particular troubled children's home thing. She doesn't run it, but she's a part of the staffing there, one of the head honchos there. And Pam is just beautiful. Just a beautiful, sweet, sweet woman that everybody seems to kind of treat as like the mother of the group, you know? And I like her a lot. Reggie really likes her a lot. He has a crush on her, which is kind of funny in certain jokes in this film. I really like that. There's not really much to talk about more when it comes to characters and whatnot. Surprisingly enough, this is the first Friday film that did not have a flashback to the previous movies, which I can't stand. Every time I put one of the other films in, like Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, and we get that whole throwback to the previous film, I skip through that. I don't give a shit. I already saw the film. I usually marathon these. I don't need that. So I just fast forward through it, and I go right past the credits, and I start the movie. That's what I do every single time. This movie, I don't have to do that. You know? Now, Tommy Jarvis is kind of being set up, possibly in this film. The way the directions are pointing, that he may or may not be dressing up as Jason and killing people in this movie. That's not a big spoiler or anything, it's just kind of hinted at constantly that Tommy is not all there. Something has been wrong with him for a long time, since the events of Part 4 when he killed Jason as a small kid, looking like Corey Feldman. He is not all there. Something is wrong mentally with him and what he's dealing with. And his trauma really hits him a lot. If somebody scares him or kind of gets in his face or anything, he kind of goes buck wild. He shows a lot of aggressive, kind of just anger issues that he can't really handle because of that kind of primal fear that he has of Jason, that primal fear that he experienced all those years ago when he was a kid. When something happens to you when you're a kid, it will haunt you the rest of your life. And I really mean that. I think anybody can tell you that, whether it be some kid calling you a name that maybe your parents called you jokingly at one point, it just kind of sticks, or maybe it's like somebody attacking you, you getting mugged, robbed, something like that. Anything like that can stick with you the rest of your life if it happens to you, especially as a kid. And it's horrific. And I feel for Tommy in that respect, even if the performance isn't great, because the directing wasn't that great. Matter of fact, a lot of the directing of the acting, and a lot of the acting and quality they picked out anyway, felt very porn-like, because of Steinman doing the directing. I don't know. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but it is one of the best. One of the best. There's a lot of nudity in this film, too, because of, again, porn director, why not? There is a lot of really wild senses of humor in the writing and in the acting. One of my favorite characters in this film, too, is also named Ethel, and she is a wild woman living not too far away from this campus where these folks are staying at, the troubled kids are staying at. And Ethel is a wild card, dude. She has a son who is not all there either. He drives a motorcycle. She's always yelling and cussing at him, and she is so funny, dude. The performance from this chick was great. I love her. I heard her on the Skeleton Crew podcast one time, and she's such a sweet chick. And hearing her quote the lines like 30 years later was so fun, dude. I love that woman. She's so funny. Very, very, very good actress. There's a lot of that in this film that I think that really a lot of people who are really good did not get the props they deserved. Now, the look of the film. It's cheaper than Part 4. Again, it feels kind of sleazy because of that. It has, when you think of a 1980s film, a lot of the time I don't think of Part 1 through 4. I think of the look of this movie, that kind of almost like a hazy look, you know? I think of that, and I don't know why. I just do. I think of this. I think about that Emilio Estevez film, Wisdom, that he wrote, directed, and starred in. I think of things like that. And I don't know why. Maybe it's just because of the camera quality at that time, I don't know. But I usually think of this film when I think of Friday the 13th, and I don't know why. Not because of it being a hardcore Jason movie. It tries to be, but not really. I think about the look of it. And I like the look of it. It might not be for everybody, and it's definitely not as high quality as Part 4's budget or anything like that allowed, but it looks cozy, and I don't know why. If it's just people out in the woods and you see the woods and stuff where they hang out, it's beautiful. Yeah, I don't know. I really like it a lot. I love the place that all these troubled kids stay at, that particular campus. I love it. I think it all looks very nice, very comfortable, I guess is the word I want to use. It just really, to me, it fits for my kind of sentiment and what I like in these movies. It fits for me. Maybe that's why Part 5 is so high up on my list. I don't know. But let's talk about the practical effects. Again, Tom Savini did not come back, but the effects that we did get, the gore effects, the makeup effects we got were so good because the kills are fucking brutal, dude. I love it. One of the things I just realized I forgot to mention for the plot is that there are two guys, one who's very aggressive, I talked about a little bit ago, and who has a lot of anger issues, and then there's another guy who is not all mentally there, who likes candy, and he keeps harassing this guy to ask him if he can help him out, and then he gets an attitude with the angry guy, which is a bad idea, especially when he's cutting wood with an axe, which why would you give that guy an axe, you know? But anyway, the guy with the axe that's angry goes nuts and kills that guy in front of everybody. It's like brutally kills him, like horrifically, and dude, the effects, when they show the aftermath, it is shocking, to say the least. Well, he gets arrested, the other guy's dead, and all of a sudden the murders that happen at Camp Crystal Lake and around those areas start to happen here. And Tommy, over time, seems to think that Jason might be coming back. And a lot of people think that Tommy might have something to do with it because he's a little weird. They don't really say it too often, but you can kind of pick up on little hints here and there that they think he's too weird, that maybe he does have something to do with this. But it's the thing with this film that's so odd. It's kind of like It's kind of a murder mystery, but it's not like a murder mystery where you have everybody sit down at one point and say, wow, we really need to figure out who the killer is. It's not like that at all. You assume it's Jason the entire time, right? Because it is. And then everything else that happens surrounding that is wild. Really, really wild. But all of the things leading up to the third act being crazy, everybody finding dead bodies and stuff, all the survivors that we care about, that stuff, to me, is done better in this movie than it was in part 1, 2, or 3, or 4, for that matter. I love the build-up to the finale of this film. It's not perfect, it's not clever, or anything like that, but I just like the execution of it better than most of the films in the franchise. I don't know why, I just do. It's fun, it's a weird movie, it's a wild movie, but again, the ending is very clearly controversial, and I understand why. I think it would piss me off too if I had seen it back when it came out, as I said, but I don't know. I feel like this film gets a bad rap for all the bad reasons, but I'm kind of glad we didn't get ties directly to this movie after this film for part 6 or 7 or whatever, because part 6 is so great. It really is. Jason Lives is an incredible movie. Now, the music I briefly touched on too on my list. Harry Manfredini came back. To me, this is one of the better scores he's done in a long time since part 1, and part 2, for that matter. But this is one of the better ones he's done since part 3, part 4. I like it better. I think it fits that 1985 feel a little bit more than the other ones that came out not too long before this movie. I like it a lot. I think it's really enjoyable. It works, you know? And I think it really fits this film good. They also had to pick a few kind of soundtrack songs, if you will, for this movie because of certain scenes where people are dancing and whatever. And you've had that in previous films too, but usually the music wasn't that great until like part 4 with some of the songs like they picked for the Crispin Glover dance. But in this movie, you have a scene with another chick doing a dance that for whatever reason, I just love it. Her name is Violet. She's kind of like an angsty teenager, and I love the song they picked for her to dance to. I don't know why. It's goofy in a very 1980s way, and I love it. With all that being said, though, I don't have much more to say. My lip is busted. It hurts really bad. It like got chapped and it cracked. Anyway, Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, is a classic of the series, in my opinion. I'll stand by that as long as I live. I try not to be too harsh anymore about people who love, like, Halloween Ends. As I said earlier, this is very similar to that. Because I defend this film constantly. Out of nostalgia, out of love for it. I think it's one of the better executed movies, even though the budget's a little bit lower than, like, Part 4. But I love it. I think it's a really good flick. I think it's a really enjoyable flick. Yeah, it's super sleazy, and that's what makes it better, I think. It's an acquired taste, as my boy Horror Free-For-All said. But I think for me, it just works. I don't know what exactly works, but it just works. It all clicks together very well, and I enjoy it every single time I watch it. I've never watched this movie one time and disliked it. Not once. Not ever had a bored moment like I do with Part 3, where I just kind of tune out sometimes because of how dull that shit is. But even like Part 4 has some kind of moments that they aren't the best. And Part 2 has that as well. Part 1 has that as well. Friday the 13th can typically have that. But this movie, for me, I don't have a dry spell anywhere in it where I just don't pay attention or I tune out for a moment. It's just a really solid all-around movie that I like a lot, and I can't believe more people don't like and appreciate this more. It's a good flick, and again, I don't just like it, I love it. It's very, very, very fun. When it comes to Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, yes, it's a flawed masterpiece, but it's a masterpiece nonetheless, in my personal opinion. Some things could be done better. Some things, logically, in the movie don't make any sense because they have to center around a twist that, personally, I don't know if it was planned to begin with. A lot of people in the behind-the-scenes stuff on this deluxe edition, or the Camp Crystal Lake Memories documentary, say that it was all planned. Personally, I don't believe that because of some of the most illogical things that are done in the movie at certain points. But man, this also has Pam in it, and I love me some Pam. Anyway, so 5-star rating, what would I give it? I'm going to go with, for me personally, this is controversial, but this is like one of my favorites ever. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 stars. I love it. I know it's flawed. I know it has some flaws, but they don't ruin the movie enough for me to make me give it a 4 out of 5. I give it a 5 out of 5. I love the shit. I think it is so much fun. It's just... it knows exactly what it is. Just like when I see like Terrifier or Terrifier 2, they know what they are, they know what their end goal game is, and they excel at what they're doing there. This movie gets so close to completely excelling that I just can't beat it down over a couple of issues here and there with some logic problems. I love it. I think it's great. I think everybody did a good job with it, which is surprising, you know? But anyway, what did you think about Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning? I'd love to see your thoughts and comments down in the comment section down below, folks. Go check out Grayson's review. Go check out Goosebumps Boy's reviews at the current moment. He's not at this movie yet, but I can't wait to see what he says about it, too. Thank you, guys. God bless you all, and goodbye.